Hey everyone, good afternoon. It's Ryan Henry with INSPIREsmall.biz, and we're trying something brand new here today on Facebook Live. At our last month's Bright Ideas show, we had three incredible speakers that were talking about identity. And so today what we're doing is we're going to talk with Pavithri Kilgore with KPSK Consulting about a more in-depth dive into the events and experiences that helped shape her talk that she presented. Pavithri, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, Pavithri, it's always a pleasure to have you, and I'm really glad you were able to make time for us
Of
here.
course.
Let's kind of skip around a little bit here and talk about a little bit about your story, because I know you had an incredible career in the corporate world before starting your own business. So why don't you just back up about as far as you're comfortable with and share with us a little bit about yourself?
um, yeah, so I am originally from Sri Lanka. We moved to the States in 92. My dad was a judge, my mom was an attorney, and my entire life I was convinced I was going to be a prosecutor till about
Oh.
my sophomore, junior year of college. And then I'm like, yeah, HE double hockey sticks, that's not going to happen here in the States. Right?
So what helped you change your mind there? Talking about becoming a prosecutor, presumably you knew there's a lot of steps to getting to that.
Well, I mean, growing up, I idolized my dad. Heck, I idolized my dad as an adult too. And spent a lot of time in court and just watching him. And it was being a defense counsel never even crossed my mind. It was always about being a prosecutor because as a prosecutor, if you find out somebody's innocent, you get to drop the case.
Mm-hmm.
As defense counsel, if you find out somebody's guilty, you still got to suck it up and defend them. And that's not where I wanted to be in life. But honestly, I knew I always wanted to have a family. And in the States, the security for a prosecutor is just not there for me to bring children or family into that picture.
That's fair. So you covered a topic that was really interesting to me. I'd heard it before, but didn't really understand what it was. Third culture kid.
Mm-hmm.
Arriving in the U.S. and then growing up and having your family here.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that experience. So for those who
Mm-hmm.
are watching who didn't see your talk before, let's start with a
Right.
little bit about third culture kids.
So, third culture kid is someone who is living in a culture that is very different from the culture they were born into or is their parents' culture. And so, somewhere in the middle is where they actually belong. So, when they're outside in society, they are off trying to blend into the culture they're growing up in.
Mm-hmm.
But once they come inside the house, you're part of the culture that you were born into.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of confusion between who am I? And that is, I think, where a lot of kids, especially immigrant children or children born to immigrants, have concerns growing up and have issues and just trying to identify who I am, what am I doing with my life, where do I belong?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your unique experience of, what are some of the things that you endured in life here growing up that you just didn't understand at the time, or it
Yeah.
took a while to
I
figure out?
mean, so I moved here as a teenager. And my very first experience into American culture was going from a all girls conservative religious school to Washington D.C. public school.
Oh, that's a step. That's quite different.
Yeah, talk about a 2x4 to the head, right? Um, I I think I was there for maybe 2 days when I came home and told my mom, I'm like, nope, going back home, not staying here. I got lucky in the fact that we moved to a area outside of DC that it was a public school, but it was mostly international students going there because it was so close to DC that I actually felt like I was home. So School there was not too bad, but at the same time, it sucked.
Yeah.
Because local children didn't like the fact that they were the minority most of the time. And there were constantly times when you're targeted because you're not who you are.
So now you're in an experience where people are like, you're different, and they perceive that as they're able to pick on you
Right.
or treat
Yeah.
you unfairly.
Yeah. It's like my husband asked me this question is like, what language did you grow up speaking? And to be honest with you, I honestly can't remember if it was English or my native language because we spoke both. And I think what's funniest is people assume I don't speak English. So when I first started school, they put me in English as a second language.
Oh, so they were in for an interesting experience.
So that was entertaining. When I started college, because my passport was not from a country where English is the declared language, I had to actually take a test that said for English as a second language students.
Oh, wow.
Now, keep in mind that test was the morning after senior prom.
Oh.
Which I went from senior prom to the test, still in the same dress. And each section, like I would finish it and then I'd literally put my head down and take a nap. It was like a 4-hour test. Go to get the results, and everybody's being handed these 3x5 cards. And I look around and I'm the only one holding this card that looks different to everybody else in the room. And I'm like, and my mom's there with me, and I'm like, oh my God, how badly did I screw this up? Only to find out I was the only one who actually got 100%. I was like, okay, cool, I can live with that. It's same in college, right? Like, I'll be at the bus station and somebody will come and start talking to me in multiple different languages. I get confused for South American, Spanish, Indian, and they'll just start talking to me in language they assume I'm from. And it used to annoy me a lot. And then I decided, you know what? Other people's ignorance is really not my problem.
Fair.
So I started having fun with it. So every time somebody starts talking to me in a language that I don't have a clue about, I just turn around and talk to them in my language, and they just freak out.
So it's taking something that is terrible because people are assuming that you can speak it, but then just having fun with them, and so you found a way to make light of what's otherwise pretty frustrating.
Absolutely. Incident. I mean, like I said in my speech, like I have never been, even as a child, I've never been one of those people that couldn't speak up or stand up for myself. But when you are completely dropped into a deep end where you don't know anybody or anything or what's right, wrong, all of it, it takes a minute.
Yeah.
And it does hit you in ways that you would never think of. And I think going through it, I figured out how to deal with it. My personality started to come back out. And yeah, I mean, I've lived in multiple states. I've been getting transferred from place to place for one of the companies I worked at. And racism exists.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's just racism. It's just stupidity exists.
Yeah. And people who
assume
things, or they have malice, or for any other number of reasons, it makes it much more difficult to get established and really kind of find who you are in a new place.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears now and talk about so you arrived in the U.S. as a teenager. You were at an international school, and so what happens after graduation? What was your next step?
I went to college. I went to University of Maryland for my undergrad, did criminal justice major. I studied a lot of the law classes, so I did criminal law, but I also did a lot of the employment laws. Not to date myself, but back in the late 90s, HR didn't really exist in companies, right? You had you had a payroll person, a benefits person, and a party planner. That's it. That was HR.
Now, to be fair, in the 90s, there were some, you had to go really out of your way, but it wasn't anything like it is today where you really can't do these things. It was just, is somebody going to say something they shouldn't to the wrong person, and then it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I think it was more of people were afraid to speak up because Title VII of the Civil Rights Act has existed for 60 years this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that people were really comfortable raising their hand and saying, this is not right, until maybe the last 15 years, maybe.
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot of times where it really was a case of, I'll just silently endure it. We talk a lot about silent quitting now. Oh, those kids never knew what late 90s, early 2000s were.
So then you bring up a good point that people weren't really comfortable bringing bringing a complaint or a concern to the attention. So as far as looking at today from the late 1990s, would you say that there's more racism, sexism, all of these negative things in the workplace, or is it just finally getting the attention that it didn't have all those years ago?
I think, I don't know that it is gotten worse. I think on both ends of it, those who would think it is now saying out loud the silent parts, because for some reason they think they now have permission to say the things they have never said out loud before. And on the other side, I think we have a culture of, I'm not going to put up with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you an example. I got moved to New Orleans for work, and talk about a female, non-white, going into New Orleans as a manager. I was actually told by a couple of employees that my only position in the company should be a receptionist, and I have no business managing him.
Oh, geez.
I had a manager tell me that it's in my best interest to find a position, company I could excel in, because I'm in a male-dominated world. Oh,
Ouch.
yeah. I remember talking to my mentor, and I'm like, did you guys ever think sending a minority female to the South to fix this crap may not have been the brightest idea? And he goes, no, we just thought of the one person who's going to go down there, speak their mind, and fix this shit.
Okay.
I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we need more people like that.
Yeah. So someone who's willing to say, this isn't going to work anymore.
Yeah.
Things are going to change right this second.
Exactly.
So let's talk about, you went to the University of Maryland. So then after graduating college, now did you go for a graduate program right away, or did you enter the workforce first?
So I actually started working my junior year at University of Maryland and stayed with that same company after I graduated. I was there for a long time. I stayed in the corporate world forever and a day. Had a very successful career there, and I did not go back to school till almost 20 years after I did my undergrad.
Oh, wow. Wow. So then what was the straw that broke the camel's back and made you decide that the corporate world was just no longer where you were going to be?
I honestly can't say that the corporate world wasn't going to be a part of my life as much as something else that happened. And I'll get to that in 1 second. So, my husband is a disabled vet, and I was the primary breadwinner. And I was covering about 12 states at the time, and I was constantly on the road, exhausting. And I realized at some point, my dad had passed away, my husband's had some serious health issues, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I am working my ass off to take care of my family, but I'm spending no time with my family. And so that was the catalyst that got me to walk away with no job lined up. And I took like a 6-month break.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, I didn't even open my laptop to update my resume. I just wanted to spend time with my family. That's all I wanted to do. And then I made a conscious decision to only apply to small businesses in the area that didn't require a lot of travel. And I started working at a small business here that had a CEO that one day looked at me and said, company policy supersedes state law, so I don't have to follow it.
Oh, no. That's not how that works.
I had a few choice words to him in the form of what in the actual blippity blip is wrong with you. And oh, congratulations, it's 2019, not 1980. And I think that was the beginning of the end of the corporate world for me, because that's when the light bulb went off that small businesses really have no access to what the big companies have as departments.
Yeah.
Right? All they have is outside counsel or a law firm that they are calling for the simplest of questions. Because to hire an HR manager, let's be honest, we're not the cheapest people on the planet.
Very true, yeah.
You're spending anywhere from $70,000 to $80,000, $90,000 to do maybe about 10, 15, 20 hours of work a month. And we like to be challenged. So all you're dealing with is paying a lot of money for not a lot of work and turnover. And that's when I made the decision, okay, I have the experience. I have no reputation in the small business world. So that's when I decided to go back to school, and I went to Tulane Law School, got my master's of jurisprudence in labor and employment law. Spencer laughs at me because he's like, you're the only one I know who got through law school without reading 90% of the textbooks. Because I had the practical experience, right? I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
But that's what led me to opening the company. And that's why I do HR from a very focused labor and employment law space, because small businesses can't throw money to fix a problem.
Very true.
They have to know what they're legally required to do and what they can and can't do, so they can make the right decision for the business without putting their investment at risk.
Yeah, and those expenses for not following the law are not cheap, and they could ruin a business. So what are some of the most common things that you see working with a new small business owner that's putting them at risk today?
It's the little things, right? It's misclassification of employees. So what does that mean? Most small businesses like to hire 1099s and run a business with them. That in itself can get you in so much trouble, because there are very specific reasons and things you have to look at before you can say somebody's a 1099 or a W-2. Not paying them properly, classifying somebody as salary when they should be hourly. Home healthcare is a place that is just home healthcare, and non-medical healthcare is a place that is getting audited quite a bit, because I know a bunch of people that are getting paid by the visit, but they're W-2 hourly employees.
That's not good.
Yeah, in so many ways. Those are the things that get small businesses in trouble. Not having a proper payroll system and withholding the proper taxes.
And so that brings up another good point is that, you said earlier in the late 90s, businesses had a payroll person and then they had the next executive and they had the next executive. So human resources is really working closely with the payroll department in any company.
Yeah, so for small businesses, HR is payroll is part of HR. Because again, can you really afford to have two?
True.
Not a lot of small businesses can, right? You've got maybe 4 or 5 employees. You're going to pay somebody to do your payroll on a constant basis?
Very true.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the minefield that is business regulation. Because during our very first conversation, one of the things that you brought
That was
up
so long ago.
It was. During our first conversation together, you shared with me that you have a passion for going through the mountain of new regulations that come out. And so I had this mental picture of like someone who's just surrounded by paper and screens waiting for the next thing to pop up. And so did that passion develop in childhood while you were still considering being a prosecutor? Or is that something that just kind of came to you as your career evolved?
I was always a curious child. I used to always go, why? Right? To the point it would drive my dad insane, and he'd be like, quit asking me X, Y, and Z because you're not going to get any more answers. I think that curiosity existed from a very young age. And the more and more I was learning the American culture and the way of life and separation of federal versus state versus local and how the rules applied, I really wanted to understand the why behind all of it. And that's kind of what 99% of the time leads me down the rabbit hole. Yeah. It's like every time I see a law, I'm like, which idiot did what and why?
Right. There's a story behind this somewhere.
I mean, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and my husband's like, you're still writing that handbook? I'm like, oh no, I'm finished with the handbook. I'm doing research. He's like, if you're done with the handbook, what research? I'm like, oh, there's a really stupid law in this state, and I want to know how it came about. He's like, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I know, but it's
fun. So out of all of those laws, I mean, there's federal law that affects businesses, there's state law, there's county and local government laws, there's different laws that apply if you have employees in multiple states.
Right.
What are some of the other places or ways that that there are laws that pop up that affect businesses? Where do they come from? Is it just all directions, or are there certain agencies?
It is all directions when it comes to legislative laws, right? Laws that are passed through legislation and either becomes local, city, county, state, federal laws, or state, federal laws. Then there are government agency regulations. And I think I've come across a lot of small businesses that know enough about employment law to be dangerous, not necessarily enough to be efficient, but has no inside information or education on how the government agencies work and how that can come back to bite you. And I think that is a huge minefield that small businesses deal with that is going to be more costly than even the laws.
Wow. And so, Pavithri, while we have this opportunity, give our viewers a chance to, how are they going to get a hold of you? Do you like the phone? Do you like the email? Do you like Facebook? Tell us how.
Well, I am all over the place, right? So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So you can message me through any of those. If you go on my website, www.kpskconsulting.com, you can fill out the form and go through there. Or any of those things also have my phone number. Call me, text me. I will be happy to help. And I am nationwide, so anywhere in the country you are, as long as it's with U.S. law, happy to help.
Nice. So, Pavithri, let's talk about another thing that you talked about during your presentation, and that is the importance of making sure that you get somebody's name pronounced properly. Um, during numerous conversations that we've had over time, that there's people out there that just don't seem to understand this or care for that matter. But let's talk a little bit about why it's important to make sure you are correctly pronouncing someone's name, not just in a business setting, but for treating them as how they deserve to be.
An individual's name from birth is the sole existence of their identity. Nothing is more important to a person than their name. Everything else comes secondary. And forget the business world, forget everything else, professionalism, all of that. But from a very simple human decency perspective, address somebody the right way. And if you really can't say it, have that conversation. I have a client who has told me flat out, like, I cannot say your name. Is it okay if I call you Mrs. Kilgore? Absolutely, I have no problems with it. But thank you for respecting me enough to have that conversation. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. It's don't make assumptions. Don't assume that you have the right to change somebody's name, create new names. Don't make that assumption.
Yeah. Certainly from the perspective of those business conversations, it makes it a lot harder to want to do business with somebody when they aren't concerned enough with knowing who are you really.
In the corporate world, I was waiting on an interview in the lobby. The interviewing person came out and was staring at her clipboard and goes, I don't know how to say this name, but if you're here to meet with name, follow me.
Ooh.
I was like, wow, this is a company I really want to work with.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay. That would be me. Here's how you say your name. And, oh, by the way, no thank you. There's the door, I'm out.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly the right way to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Self-respect.
Yeah. So I mean that's a heavy topic, and but it's an important one, because if we're not taking the time to get to know the people that are kind of in our sphere, part of our business, or even just friends of ours, then what's the point if we don't know who they are?
Yeah.
So once again, give everyone the contact information for how they can get a hold of you at KPSK Consulting.
I think the best way would be for you to go on www.kpskconsulting.com. My email, phone number, and contact page is in there, or any of the social media pages.
Awesome. Well, Pavithri, thank you so much for taking the time to be my guest here today. To everyone who's watching, if you want to meet Pavithri in person, you've got some really good opportunities to do that here. Coming up this Friday, July 12th, we have the next business spotlight at the Buca de Beppo near the Castleton Mall. Get registered for that in advance, because you could choose to have your contact info printed in a booklet that everyone gets when they arrive. Why is that important? Well, everyone who shows up at the event gets 45 seconds with a microphone to talk to the whole room and share what it is your business does and when it's time to get in touch with you. So if you hear somebody and you're like, oh my God, I have to meet this person, you don't have to run through a room packed full of people to get their business card. It's just all conveniently right there in the list for you. And this is an incredible opportunity to talk to an entire room of people at one time. It's just an amazing event. Also starting this week, the next issue of the INSPIREsmall.biz magazine is available. On the cover of this issue is Samantha Simpson, who was also a speaker at one of our after hours events here a few months ago. one last thing I'll make sure to cover before we wrap up here today, and that is the 17th of July is the next Bright Ideas show. So that's at the Northside Events and Social Club near 71st and Keystone here in Indianapolis. And our theme for the month is balance. So you don't want to miss that. www.inspiresmall.biz/bright ideas to get registered for Business Spotlight. It's www.inspiresmall.biz/spotlight. Pavithri, thank you very much again for being our guest on today's show. And to everyone watching, make sure you join us for future events. You get to meet Pavithri in person, a lot of other really good small business owners. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.